Okay. Vamos. Cool. I just got back from doing an ice bath, like 7 p.m. at night. Freaking amazing. So, highly recommend doing ice baths. They wake me up, make me feel energized and ready to go. Oh, okay, cool. So guys, today's episode is building off of what we've been talking about, this PPC balance. I feel like we've been on this forever now, but what's really cool about that actually, that I hadn't noticed before in reading this book, is how much the PPC balance, the production capability balance, is integrated into the seven habits. That's why it's talked about so much here in the preface, is because that is the foundation upon which all the seven habits are built. I feel like each time I go through this book, the holistic picture of the seven habits gets more holistic for me. Like the way that the way that each individual habit interacts with other habits, interacts with itself, and interacts with this like foundation of principles gets more clear and more simple and more understandable for me each time I go through this book. The first time I went through it, it was kind of like each individual habit. The second time, it was like, oh, like they actually have like a relationship to each other. And now as I'm going through it again, it's like this foundation of like this PPC balance and like how just effective and powerful and like amazing it is. So this section is called organizational PC. So we've been talking about this idea of the PPC balance and stuff, and how there's three kind of assets. There's physical assets, financial assets, and human assets. In this particular section, he mentions a little bit about the physical assets, and not a ton about financial assets, but a lot about the human assets. It also kind of ties into the eighth habit, which is another amazing book that we can do another podcast on, but super good too. So he essentially, this part is taking this PPC balance, and essentially I'm just going to give more like examples of the PPC balance and like why it's so important. And he says that's like what's kind of cool about it is he says that sometimes the balance between P and PC can be difficult to examine or know or define. That's like a really interesting concept to me, because I've always kind of had this theory of like, oh yeah, just balance it out, you know. But like, no, I guess when you get to specific actions, it like gets a lot harder to define like which actions do you take. And I don't quite understand that yet, having not been a parent or even like a high up leader with like tons of people under me or other scenarios. I just don't have a lot of experience with that yet. Or maybe I have it, just I'm not aware of it. But really, this really cool idea of the fact that like the PPC balance is the foundation for the seven habits, and it applies to all of them. So I guess I have had experience with it because I've been implementing these seven habits. I just need to become more aware of it now. So I'm going to choose to do that because that's really cool, actually. Okay, actually, yeah. So he goes on to this idea of this physical assets first in this like organizational thing. So in like business and stuff, he talks about how he rates this example of how one person might use this machine and just milk it, use it again and again and again and again, and focus on a ton of golden eggs on production, on getting results. Now in the accounting part of this firm, they're counting units being produced, so costs are down, profits are skyrocketing, and this employee is getting mad rapport with upper management until he gets promoted, right? Well, then who comes in and takes his spot, right? Like, let's say it's you or me. We get there to his spot, and this machine is destroyed. Absolutely worn out, beat, exhausted, has no energy left in it. Now we're the ones having to deal with maintaining it, with restarting it, with servicing it to make sure it can produce these golden eggs. And then what does the accounting book say? Oh, this employee that doesn't know what he's doing, he's not producing any units, right? And so then we get in trouble for that. And so it's this idea of like how this importance of the PPC balance and how we can even sometimes use up like, or almost like liquidate an asset, a physical asset, whether it be like a lawnmower in your family or like a dishwasher or like, who knows, like a rag that you use to clean the bathrooms. Like, I don't even know, but like those kind of things, we can use these things up, and then the people that come behind us kind of get shafted. So just be careful of that. So I kind of turn that into my life, and why that's important for me is I feel like there's this idea. So I love reading books. Reading books is something that I enjoy it. I think it's awesome to be able to learn and to be able to fill my mind with knowledge and wisdom and truth and light, for that matter. And so how this would relate to books is if I spend my whole life reading books but never actually apply that knowledge, I'm focusing way too much on production capability. Now, if I spend my whole life just applying the things that I know, but not learning, like reading more books and more knowledge, then I'm focusing too much on golden eggs, on the production. So there has to be this balance between actually like doing, like between reading the books, gaining the knowledge, but then applying that knowledge. And so it's this one eternal round that happens as you increase in the production capability, or you increase your knowledge, and then use and apply that knowledge. Increase in knowledge, apply that knowledge. Increase in knowledge, apply that knowledge. On the doors, it relates to like sales training, right? I could spend all day training on my sales skills and powers of persuasion and influence, but if I never even use those, then it doesn't even matter in the first place. Like, why am I even doing it? But if I just go out there and try to persuade and influence, and I don't train or role play or work, and like not, if I just knock doors and not like increase my closing ratio, then like my PC isn't going to ever like grow at all, and I'm going to keep producing the same amount of golden eggs, or probably less actually, because of how frustrated I would get, right? And so there's that. Stephen Covey talks about this example of a restaurant where this amazing clam chowder was being served and customers loved it. Business was booming. And then the owner shifted to a different owner, and he decided to water down this chowder. And for about a month, costs came down, and revenues continued to soar. But then customer loyalty left. As the customers realized this clam chowder didn't taste that well, actually, they left. And it got to the point where they basically almost ran out of business, and it was too late to like bring back and to save. That PC was already lost. That customer loyalty was already gone. And so he wasn't able to get the P, which is the money. So that leads right into a really cool principle. He says here, he says that there are organizations that talk a lot about the customer and then completely neglect the people that deal with the customer, the employees. The PC principle is to always treat your employees exactly as you want them to treat your best customers. That's a really cool line. There's this idea of Clayton Christensen talks about this idea of resource allocation, and how we have intended strategies and actual strategies, and how we have to align our resources with our intended strategy and make it the actual strategy. We can say all we want, that we want strategy A, but if our resources are aligned to implement strategy B, then strategy B is the actual strategy will actually happen, and whatever road that leads to will be your outcome, not the one that you actually wanted. And so he's saying here that you have to allocate your resources in a way to where the people who deal with your customers are taken care of, or rather like your employees, right? So he it's like really cool. He like tells the story about how he was in this group and someone asked him, how do you shape up lazy and incompetent employees? And one of them responds back with like, oh, like give them the hand, like drop hand grenades, like intimidate them, right? And all the other supervisors are like, yeah, like hopping in like macho style, right? And someone else asks, well, who picks up the pieces? And they say, no pieces, whoa, yeah, macho style. And the guy says, well, why don't you do that to your customers? Just say, listen, if you're not interested in buying, you can just ship out of this place. And they respond back with like, well, you can't just yell at your customers like that. And he says, well, like, why not? Like, how come you can do it to your employees then? And they're like, well, because like they're employees. And he says, well, look, like, yeah, but like, how's turnover? How's the employee turnover? Like, do they work hard? Are they like loyal to you? And this guy responds back saying, are you kidding? You can't find good people these days. There's too much turnover, absenteeism, moonlighting. People just don't care anymore. So 2 things I see wrong with that. The first one is it's super reactive, which we're going to go over in habit 1. But 2, he's actually incriminating himself right here. He says people just don't care anymore. Yeah, he's right. That manager does not care about his employees one bit. That's why he has so much turnover and absenteeism and moonlighting and ghosting and lazy, unproductive employees, because he doesn't care about them. Stephen Covey talks about in the section about how you can buy a person's hand, but you can't buy his heart, his loyalty, his enthusiasm. You can't buy that. You have to genuinely care. You have to truly love them as people and understand them and listen to them in order for these people to give you their best. He says you can buy his back, but you can't buy his brain. Now, brain is interesting because, again, that's where the creativity is. That's where the imagination is, where the resourcefulness is. That's where the powers of revelation, inspiration are, right? That's like where new things happen. And so you can't buy a person's mind and heart. You just have to love them as people and care about them. Truly, truly care about them. The owner of my company, he says something along these lines of the fact he says, I don't want to put this in a checklist, but it's so essential, and sometimes you just don't do it. I feel like I have to. See, it should not be in a checklist, but like I feel like I have to put it in there because we just don't do it. And that's just caring about people, just genuinely caring about people, looking out for their welfare and their good being. It's like a really cool concept. And so Stephen Covey explains in this section that PC work is treating employees as like volunteers. Like customers come to you voluntarily. Like they don't have to buy your products or your services. They're like of their own free will choosing to use your services. And so like you should treat employees the exact same way. Like they don't have to be there. They could be somewhere else. And so you should also treat them as employees. And so like when these managers focus so much on golden eggs, when they have that attitude and that paradigm of just production, what ends up happening is they're unable and unaware and incompetent of tapping in to the powerful energies of human beings, of the mind and the heart. They can't tap into that. And it's so sad. And that's what the 8th Habit's all about, is finding your voice and then helping others find their voice as well. It's an amazing book. But it's about seeing people as people, not as things. That we have ingenuity and creativity, that we can do amazing things. We just need to dive into it and bring it to the surface. But so often our resources, our strategies restrict those. We straitjacket our potential and our being. And so effectiveness lies in the balance of these things. Just some other examples that he uses here. Excessive focus on P or production, like it can result in like ruined health, right? Like if you focus so much on your work that you don't exercise, where does that lead you in 10 years? But if you're only exercising and not working, then you're not providing for your family and you're living in a super poor home and not like actually providing and putting bread on the table. So there has to be this balance, right? Worn out machines, depleted bank accounts, and broken relationships. There's this, he talks about here about like, this is actually pretty funny. He says, too much focus on PC is like a person who runs 3 or 4 hours a day, bragging about the extra 10 years of life it creates, unaware he's spending them running. Or a person endlessly going to school, never producing, living on other people's golden eggs, the eternal student syndrome. Just some ideas of the PC paradigm where it's not balanced out. I remember this devotional that Brad Wilcox gave at UVU. He was actually quoting Stephen Covey in this devotional, which is probably why I remember it. But essentially he said that Stephen Covey would donate to charities, right, throughout his life. And he said, if we wait until we, quote unquote, like have more money or are more financially secure or stable to donate to charities or to help out nonprofit organizations that are like for good, we actually never will. Like if that's our mindset, like, oh, like once I have more money, then I'll donate. It's like, no, like you actually will never donate if that's your paradigm. Like donate $5, $10, like right now. Like that's the way to make sure that it happened. That's keeping the end in mind. That's beginning with the end in mind and then keeping it in mind, you know? I was thinking the other day, like, about like my goals for this next summer that are coming up and how a big part of the reason why I'm doing it is to gain like the character growth and the financial resources and even like the skills of persuasion and influence in order to build the kingdom of God, right? That's like something that like really motivates me, that I think about a lot. But I say that because it's like, well, if I'm not actually doing the things that build that kingdom now, then like I won't actually do it after the summer. And so like, yes, I have to focus on these goals and become the best version of myself to be a better instrument in the Lord's hands. But like if I'm actually not doing that right now, I won't ever actually do that, ever. And so that's just something too that like effectiveness lies in that balance between the two of them. And so it's like sometimes that is hard to figure out like where that balance is, right? Like he talks about here about grades and paying the price to get an education. Like especially in our education system, we can breeze through assignments, get them done, over with. But are we actually getting an education? Probably not. And so that's like a struggle that I deal with a lot is how much time do I spend between getting the good grade and actually learning material and like getting it done, right? And like it's like hard for me to determine where that balance is, but effectiveness lies in the balance, right? Or he gives here the example again of like cleaning your room, right? Like it balances this desire of having a clean room and building a relationship in which this like child is internally motivated and committed to cleaning the room and doing it with like a cheerful attitude without any sort of like supervision or external like parenting, right? Nagging, you could say. And so like this balance is very, very important, and like that's the foundation of all of the 7 habits is this balance between P and PC, not focusing on one or the other too much, but concentrating on the middle ground. Yeah, that's like essentially what this is all about. One more example that I do want to go over is this idea of winning an argument or a discussion with a friend. this is actually a very interesting concept that I think I had always subconsciously knew about, but never really articulated or realized was happening. Like, there were times when I would definitely win my friend in like an argument or like a discussion. Like, he would like admit that I was right, and like it felt like I felt like I had won, but I felt empty inside. Like something was missing. Like I had won, but it felt like I had lost. And that's because the relationship was broken. It like tore. There was like an emotional withdrawal. And what I mean by that is like trust was lost, respect was lost, maybe even like love was lost, or friendship was lost. It's like you win the argument, but you kind of like lost the war. Like you like won that discussion, but you lost what was most important, that friendship, that relationship, right? And so it really is this balance of like understanding each other rather than going for like a win lose paradigm. It's more of like just understanding each other. Like today, I had a pretty deep conversation with a buddy of mine about some pretty like important stuff in his life, and he had a very different perspective on it than I did, and like very different. But that doesn't necessarily mean that like either one of us was right or wrong. And it was a really cool conversation because at the end of it, we didn't like neither one of us backed down from our side, and we both keep acting with integrity to our paradigms of the topic, but we understand the other person's paradigm, and we like know where that person's coming from. And it was actually like a really cool experience to go through that, and it like took a lot longer than a normal conversation, but it was well worth it. It's something worth celebrating. And that's like something that's like really cool for me in learning these ideas, is because these principles are always there. We can either work with the principles or we can work against them, but they're there. Like the owner of a company, it just taught me a lot. He says that we are setting, especially like in my age group, like 20, 21, even like in your teens or possibly even in your 30s, he says you are setting the foundation for your life. Whether you know that or not, whether you're aware of it or not, whether it's intentional or not, you are. So like, what is it? Which is so true because principles always exist. They're always there. And so we're always either working with principles or working against principles. And so that's something that was like really powerful for me. And so this whole idea of the PPC balance, really cool to study out right now to kind of understand that effectiveness lies in the balance. And sometimes that's a hard judgment call, but having faith that like that's where it is. That like it's a lighthouse to guide us in our directions and our pathways to get to where we want to be and to win in the ways that matter most. So guys, thank you much for joining on this podcast. Let me know if you have any questions or concerns. Please reach out to me. This is definitely something that I love to do. This is like definitely, well, I guess it's PCNP, but actually talk to people about this stuff. I love it. So don't hesitate to reach out, guys. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day. Appreciate it.